Hello and welcome to the Rewind, where we dive into the making and legacy of various films from cult classics to award-winning masterpieces. Today's film is The Godfather Part 3, the concluding chapter of the Godfather film franchise that stars Al Pacino as Michael Corleone, the aging patriarch of the Corleone family, who attempts to legitimize his criminal empire by buying $600 million worth of shares from the Vatican in an international real estate company. Michael, meanwhile, has also taken under his wing Vincent Mancini, the illegitimate son of his late brother Sonny and future Godfather. The least revered film in the Godfather trilogy, The Godfather 3, nevertheless was a box office success and scored several Oscar nominations. And the film also has its legions of fans, me among them. I kind of view The Godfather 3 as kind of like when Michael Jordan played with the Washington Wizards. There are flashes of brilliance there, but it doesn't really match to those previous championship runs that he had. Joining me now is Chris Bumbray, the editor-in-chief of JoBlo. Thank you very much, Chris, for joining me today to talk all things Godfather 3.
Hey, my pleasure, Matthew. Nice to see you.
So, the first time I saw this film, I was going through a Pacino kick. So, my big thing, my origin story, like film review origin story, it goes back to Serpico. Watched it late one
Mm.
night on TV. It was like I was in my early 20s, fell in love with it. Then I went through all things Pacino. But the films I hadn't watched yet was The Godfather. See, so the box set had just come out. Borrowed the box set from my brother, who I think he borrowed it from a friend, and watched all three movies. Now, when you watch all three movies in succession like that, the third one, of course, doesn't match the first. The first two are masterpieces. Everyone agrees that. But that's not to say that I didn't enjoy the film. I actually quite liked it quite a bit. And since then, I've grown to like it even more, even though there are many flaws to it, and we'll talk about that. What about yourself, Chris? Do you remember the first time you came across The Godfather 3?
Yeah, very well. My history with it is a lot different. It's actually the first Godfather movie that I saw, funny enough. Just because when I was young, I had this the Canadian version of HBO, I guess it was called the Movie Network. And when
Okay.
we first got it, I think I was about 10 years old, and that was the year that The Godfather Part 3 was playing on that channel. And I would just watch everything that I could watch on that channel, regardless of whether I had any interest in it or not. I would just watch whatever was on, like literally whatever was on TV. So I saw it when I was a kid, and I knew nothing about the other Godfather movies. I knew that it was the third movie in a series, and I didn't really get it. Like it made no sense to me whatsoever. But I as a young child, I was just excited to be watching an R-rated movie, and I loved everything that I saw. Um, but then, as time went by, I did see The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2. And then, of course, I went back and I revisited Godfather Part 3. And I went through a phase where I kind of hated it, right? Like a lot of people did, where I would talk about, the first two Godfathers are amazing, but then the third is just a piece of crap. But then, you know, during the pandemic, I watched all of them again. And I was doing a thing with my partner at the time. Her and I every night we would watch a Godfather movie with a bottle of Coppola wine. And the first two, of course, are amazing. But then I actually really enjoyed the third, much more than I had when I had seen it originally. I think the thing about it was that I could see all the flaws, and there are numerous flaws, but there are, like you said, flashes of brilliance. There are moments in the movie that stack up against anything that's in the other two movies. That said, there's a lot of mediocrity and there's a lot of idiocy in the film, and then there's the one crucial misstep that he made, which is, and I'm sorry to say it, Sofia Coppola's performance. It was a fatal piece of miscasting. And it's kind of shocking to me, the nepotism involved there, that he didn't see it, where even Coppola herself, when she's been interviewed, had said that she feels that, as a director herself, she feels that she was terribly miscast and didn't give a good performance. And I don't think he did her a favor opening her up to that kind of criticism either. He had to know that it wasn't a great performance as a director. That said, there are great things about the movie, and then I especially liked it when I saw later the re-edit of the movie, The Godfather Coda: The Death of Michael Corleone, which rearranges the movie and is shorter, and I think is a much better film.
I think that when it comes to that Coda one, I think like I liked it as well. I mean, I the way he kind of I think like the scene with the Vatican officials is pushed to the front, is like all kind
Yeah.
of changes and stuff to it. But there's sometimes when you watch kind of like these director's cuts, it's there's a kind of rhythms to watching a film for such a long time that you still
Yeah.
kind of the things that come into my brain more than anything else is the original versions that I saw of the movie. And while the original, the director's cut, the Dakota version is, I also think is the better version. I still have such a soft spot for that original cut, even though a lot of people
Yeah.
don't like it. There's something about it, and I think it just maybe might come down to a certain nostalgia, maybe just or something like that. But there's something about that original cut that, to me, still, it's even though it's not like we like, and we, sorry to repeat ourselves in regards to comparisons to the first two movies. It doesn't match to those first two movies, but if you're talking about the best movies of that year, I for sure will put it in the top five for that
Oh
year,
yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. Of course. Yeah. And if you look at the Oscar nominations that year too, I mean, there were great movies that came out in 1990. That's the thing, it was up against Goodfellas and Dances with Wolves. And I think the fact
Mm.
that it came out the same year as Goodfellas really hurt it, right? Because I mean, you're talking about a masterpiece on par with the first two Godfather movies, and then Godfather 3 comes out, and what a deflating disappointment it must have seemed. But also, what you mentioned and is worth noting too is the movie was not a bomb. People kind of look back at it like it was a bomb, but it was not. I mean, it made like well over $100 million worldwide. I think it made something like $136 million worldwide. So it was not a flop. It did pretty well at the box office. And it was relatively well received, although even back then people had issues with Coppola's performance. But it was up for Oscars. It wasn't, it wasn't the disaster I think that people seem to think it is now. It's just that I think when people started watching it again and again and comparing it to the others, that was when its flaws became really apparent, and there are a lot of them.
Yeah, it's kind of like what I was saying before about like the Michael Jordan Wizard season.
Yeah,
Um, it's
I'm
like he
happy it
comes,
exists. Like
yeah,
I'm happy it exists and I'll watch it. It's not what the other two are, though. Of course not. But then again, we've gotten a lot of crappy legacy sequels, and if you
yeah.
compare it to those, it's pretty good.
Yeah, and I really agree with that. The process of making this film is just a
Mhm.
movie in itself. It's quite incredible. So the first two movies come out 72, 74, groundbreaking movies, Oscars, box office, established careers of so many actors and Francis Ford Coppola himself. So we all know this. So Paramount Pictures are like, we want more Godfather, but Coppola's like, I'm not interested. Mario Puzo as well, not interested. But they'll go in ahead anyway. And so there's like 2 decades, actually a decade and a bit of just like them trying to get this movie off the ground, and so many people have looked at it. A
And
lot of it comes
Stallone was one
from,
of them. Even
yeah,
Stallone at one point. Yeah.
that's correct. I think it was like 83, I think they approached him. So there's this guy named Charles Bluedorn.
Blue
He
Dorn.
was the president of Paramount Pictures at the time. He was like this industrialist. He's the one that really kind of pushed wanting more Godfather. He saw it as like this viable franchise. He wanted more and more of it. So he's the one that kind of gets the ball rolling with this. He brings in this guy. His name is Richard Brooks, who's a screenwriter.
Yeah.
He directed In Cold Blood, which is a Truman Capote thing. Brings him in first.
And he had a big hit for Paramount as well that I just saw at a revival screening recently, Looking for Mr. Goodbar with Diane Keaton from The
Diane
Godfather.
Keaton.
And that was a massive hit movie.
And so he brings Brooks in. He's like, I got this 53-page treatment. Brooks like, I don't want to do a movie for a story that has ended. Like he's like, this is done. No one wants to do this. Next, he brings in a producer named Don Simpson. And then there's a version of a film where, in the 70s, there's a lot of stories revolved around, a lot of plots revolved around the CIA. The CIA is like a big thing here. And CIA and links to Michael Corleone or Anthony Corleone, the son. So like he's like a main character in a lot of these early kind of things as well. This one story that I had in 77, where I had Anthony Corleone was like a FBI agent who goes undercover in the mob, but then he gets betrayed by the CIA, and then he ends up being like stuff like that going around. In 78, they finally bring Puzo back on. He does a script for it, where this one had John Travolta attached as Michael Corleone's son Anthony. Again, he plays like some type of CIA agent. You got like places like Puerto Rico involved in it, like as locations and such. That doesn't take either. And then there's another version of a script that comes around. Again, CIA. Anthony's a wounded Vietnam War veteran. Tom Hagen's in it. He does a big role in it. Again, nothing kind of keeps going. And then in 78 as well, Travolta's out. They bring Eric Roberts in. It was going to be his first movie. He was going to play Anthony Corleone. Nothing happens. 82, again, they kick around an idea. This time it was going to be an illegitimate son from Sicily, from when Michael was with Alaponia. What was it? Alaponia was her name? The first wife.
No,
Like his illegitimate son, they're bringing to Italy. There's like a big thing happening there. Nothing happens at all. Um, so all this goes on, and then it goes to the Stallone part, which I think is
mhm.
just fascinating. So it's 83. He's directing the sequel to Saturday Night Fever, Staying Alive.
Yes, staying alive.
Um,
Yeah,
so supposedly he says it was this great interview series he did with Ain't It Cool News back in 2010 or something when Expendables was about to come out. He said he comes into Paramount offices and they gave a mock poster and it says Godfather Part 3 written, acted and directed by Sylvester Stallone, and he said no, like straight away. He
yeah,
said
and
he
I
actually
don't blame
said
him too.
yeah, he said it's the worst problem that's ever been since I've been conceived. It's like
Well,
yeah,
could
that's
you
what he
imagine
said.
how that would have been received? I mean, people would have just been mocking him. I mean, those movies were unassailable classics, and I get it. That would have been a disaster, and it was smart of him to turn it down. That's a lose-lose scenario, though, doing a Godfather sequel without Francis Ford Coppola. I mean, they're gonna try and reboot it at some point, now, and I can't see them doing it.
Meanwhile, Coppola is going through like a real big string of bombs. You have like One from the Heart, Tucker, the Man in His Dream. What was the one he did? The musical
The
one,
Cotton Club,
Cotton
huge
Club. That
flop.
was a huge one.
A couple
Um,
people got killed doing that movie too. That was the thing. It was with the financing of the film. It was very shady.
Hi guys, Matt here from Matt's Movie Reviews, letting you know that the Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel has launched channel membership. This provides exclusive videos and other cool stuff as well for all channel members. It's under one tier, one price, and with that one price you get exclusive reviews. For example, I'll be going through the American Film Institute's top 100 movies. So every week I'll do a new review based on that movie list. You can get exclusive reviews based on your requests. Request a movie review and I will review it for you. You'll also get exclusive content for behind the scenes stuff as well. You also get exclusive interviews that I haven't posted yet as part of my podcast, like older interviews with Academy Award winners and other great filmmakers and actors as well, and a bunch of other cool stuff as well. I hope you can all join up, be part of this great experience I have on offer for you. Support indie content creators, support a movie critic like myself who is trying to make it through the content creator space. Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel memberships. Please join and get some great exclusive content. And he's broke. In fact, he's so broke that like 2 months into filming Godfather 3, he files for bankruptcy.
Yeah.
So he's now open to negotiating because he needs money. They bring Puzo back. He writes a script, and then they bring in Talia Shire, who is the sister of Coppola. She plays Connie, of course, in the movies. And they're like, give this script to your brother, convince him to come on. And he reads the script and goes, this sucks. And she's like, well, then write your own bloody script. And he does. And him and Puzo put something together. And going back to the death of Michael Corleone, that's what they won the quarter film, the death of Michael Corleone. And they saw it more as an epilogue than like as a
Yeah.
follow-up kind of movie. And Paramount says no today. They don't want that to happen. But nevertheless, they kind of continue. It's like an aging Godfather and such. Francis Ford Coppola, post Godfather 2. Um, it's a sketchy track record. It really is. You can talk about how great the conversation is. Apocalypse Now, of course, but then that movie was its own kind of like, um, disaster in many ways with behind the scenes stuff. But when we look back on the legacy of Francis Ford Coppola, especially with Megalopolis, like not that far off from where we are today, how do you kind of look at these kind of like 80s leading up to Godfather 3? Because to me, it's like there's some interesting films there, Outsiders and Rumblefish, etc. But
Yeah.
it's definitely someone who is attempting to create, that's for sure, but he never becomes like the success without adapting some type of material that's in front of him, whether it be a Godfather or Dracula. When it comes to his own original stories, rarely does he ever make anything worth maybe watching or worth or that's made any money really.
Well, I mean, the thing is, you have to remember that Coppola at the time, he was trying to build his own studio, right? He had Zoetrope Studios, and that was his passion project. And he had, hoped to do this kind of contained thing where it would be an experimental new way of making movies, right? With electronic cinema. And if you look at One from the Heart, I mean, it was pretty cutting edge for the time because he shot everything against video screens, right? And that's the way that, movies are routinely shot now on these huge LED screens. He just didn't really have the technology that we do now, and it was very expensive, and he was trying things out. So on a technical level, One from the Heart's a fascinating movie. Dramatically, it's kind of inert though. And he excuse me, and he had a whole string of movies that were like this, that, they were all attempts by him to push the envelope, technically. But then I think he lost track of the creative aspect of those movies. I mean, yeah, Outsiders is a good movie. Rumblefish is an interesting movie. I actually really like The Cotton Club. I think The Cotton Club has like moments in it that are as good as anything in The Godfather. But then it's also got some fatal issues. And I think the big problem with The Cotton Club is that you've got two stories. You've got the A story and the B story. The A story in the movie is Richard Gere as like a trumpet player goes to Hollywood, and then the B story is Gregory Hines and Morris Hines as these black entertainers at the Cotton Club, which of course only had black entertainers but wouldn't allow white patrons. They should have been reversed. The Hines brothers should have been the A story, and the Gere story should have been the B story, and it should have been a stronger actor than Richard Gere because at the time he just was not up to acting in a movie like that. He just his performance is not good in the film. Anybody but him would have been great. Somebody like Pacino would have been amazing,
Hmm.
but the Hines brothers are absolutely brilliant in the film, and again, Coppola re-edited it not long ago for the Cotton Club Redux, which is longer, and it's better. It's a significantly better movie because that was a movie that was kind of taken away from him and re-edited by Robert Evans. And it was a huge disaster, but it's kind of fascinating. Like it is a very good movie. There's a lot of great stuff in it. But it was such a disaster, that and One from the Heart, and that pretty much ruined him. And he did Tucker, the Man in His Dream, which I found almost unwatchable. I mean, I something about that movie just really kind of drives me nuts. Like it's like getting your teeth drilled at the dentist for 2 hours. Just such a saccharine biopic and so fake and artificial. Gardens of Stone also was a huge flop, and then he had a major personal tragedy too when his son Gio got killed horribly in a horrible accident. Um,
Was it a jet ski
so
accident or something like that, was it?
they were going between two boats, and there was
Right.
a tow line and it hit him, and
Oh God.
it was really terrible. It was Ryan O'Neal's son was driving the boat, and it was a big thing, the big scandal. But anyway, so yeah, so by the time Godfather 3 came along, I think he needed that movie really badly. And the thing is, it did kind of do the trick for his career, though. It dug him out of bankruptcy. His next movie was a very good movie, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it was one of his biggest hits. And he was able to go on and continue making movies for, I don't know if he would have been able to build his wine business if it wasn't for The Godfather 3. So it was good for him, and you can understand why he made that movie when he did. Also, the exploration in the film of what it is being a father, right, and having relationships with your children as they try to, pick up the torch, and what you want from them and what you want your legacy to be. I think he was wrestling with ideas of like that when he did Godfather. He was maybe almost too young to do it. Maybe if he had waited another 10 years, it would have been a better movie. Because I think everybody's playing 10 years older than they actually are. And I think that, if he had waited another decade, maybe it would have been better. But I think what we should do, though, would be interesting is we should get into what's good about it and what's bad about it. Because I feel like we both have huge lists for both, right?
Well, the number one thing that I think is good about it is Al Pacino. I think he is
Yeah, of course.
fantastic in
Gino's
this
great.
movie.
Yeah. Very
And
different performances as
yes,
with his voice though, and it's not he really does seem older, right? Yeah.
and the thing about that's interesting about Pacino at this point, where similar to Coppola, um, Pacino was kind of like on a comeback trail. A lot of
Yeah.
people don't know this, but in the 80s, he wasn't in a film for like 5 years. I think he did a film called Revolution 1985, which was
Big
a big
flop.
flop
Yeah.
after a succession of them. And then he does Sea of Love in 1989, and that was like the return of Pacino, but a different Pacino,
Yeah.
raspy, weathered, the smoking and the alcohols. It's kind of taking him, but
Yeah, it's the
he's
Pacino that
still
we
there.
know now showed up for the first time in Sea of Love. Yeah.
And he was broke. He actually says
Yeah.
like in I think it was in his biography, Sonny Boy, that came out last year. He said, like, I was broke, Francis was broke, we both needed the bread, and so
Yeah.
they did it. He was paid like a quite a pretty penny, $8 million. He was paid
Yeah.
for that role back in 1990, which I think was something incredible for that time. But I think what he does with the performance in the role and why he wasn't nominated for an Oscar, I don't know. I think it's one of his best performances. Is fantastic because not only is Michael different as a man, he's like burdened by the guilt and he's weathered and he just wants to get out and the popular line wants to get out, they pull me back in. Like there's that thing about him, and I think Pacino himself is kind of like that. I think he went through the battles, he went through the wars, and now he's like returning to this character who pretty much broke him in Hollywood. The Godfather was like his big kind of usher way to becoming a movie star. So I definitely think he is like, if not the biggest like bright spot in the film, one of them for sure.
Well, I think that him and Diane Keaton as well. I think they're both great in the movie, and I think the relationship, him trying to rebuild the relationship and him realizing that he lost his family by pursuing this kind of cold-blooded path. I think that's really well done, and I think the fact that that he murdered Fredo in the last movie, that haunting him as well, pays off very well in the film. And I liked the idea of him trying to go legitimate. I liked everything involving the Vatican. I thought that was great. Tying in the Vatican history. There's some really great stuff there. Um, I think Andy Garcia, I mean, I know it's controversial. I think Garcia, even though he's not Italian, I think is great in the movie. It's just
Fantastic. Yeah.
his storyline sucks with
Hmm.
with the daughter. Like bringing incest into the movie is such a weird choice that they made. Like it seems like who thought that was a great idea? Considering this is Sonny's son. I get it. I mean, he was trying to be provocative and he was trying to be, was trying to make it an allegory and stuff like that. But it's just, to me, that might have landed if Sofia Coppola had been better in the role, and she just wasn't. And I think that that's the movie's fatal flaw. It's Sofia Coppola and kind of everything that revolves around her. And unfortunately, it's a lot of the movie because she's really like the second lead in the film.
Andy Garcia to me is, I think he is one of the bright spots. I know that the incest storyline in the film is just crazy bad, but the part of him being the successor, kind of like
Yeah.
being groomed
Oh
by
yeah, that's
Pacino throughout
great.
the film,
That stuff is
that's
excellent. Yeah.
that stuff's great. And the fiery temper he kind of brings to the role. In 1990 was a huge, like he was in Untouchables like in 87, but 1990 was really the coming out year for Garcia because he was also in this fantastic movie you mentioned Richard Gere before called Internal Affairs, which I thought was
Yeah, he was like a
fantastic.
super stud that year. He was like that period, he seemed like he was going to be the next Pacino, right? So I get why they put him in that movie. His career has been solid since. It just didn't pan out, I think, the way that people thought it would back in 1990. But yeah, and he's violent and he's really, and I always thought if they had made another Godfather movie with him as the Don, and tied him into like the cocaine business and stuff like that, it would have been really interesting. And I know that there were discussions to do that at some point. Um, yeah, I think he's fantastic. I think one of the big mistakes, though, also is not bringing back Robert Duvall
Robert
as Tom
Duvall,
Hanks.
yeah.
I think they tried to, he wanted too much money, I guess, and they tried to spin it off with him having a son, and then George, oh God,
George Hamilton.
George Hamilton, bringing him. I mean, he's fine in the movie, but he's not Robert Duvall, right? Like that role and all that plot. If it had been Tom Hagen and his son, would have been so much more dynamic, right? That's a huge problem. But then there are moments like individual moments in the film that are so good. Like the attack on the Dons is brilliantly conceived and is one of the best scenes in the whole series, I think.
I think I 100% agree with what you just said there regarding the ball and the helicopter attack scene. Joey Zaza's got an attack on the Dons in
Yeah,
Atlantic City.
yeah,
Again, going back to Garcia, the way he says Zaza in the film is an
yeah.
iconic
Oh,
from this movie.
Zaza.
Yeah. But also my favorite scene in the movie is actually the confession scene where
Oh, yeah,
Michael
that's a great scene.
confesses to the Cardinal. The
Raffalone. Yeah,
So to me that's fantastic because the acting's fantastic and everything in there. But Pacino actually said something really interesting in that he thought that the reason why a lot of people didn't take to the movie is because they didn't want to see Michael as kind of like this guy begging for forgiveness and way down. They wanted to see like El Patron. You don't want to see the Godfather. They wanted to see like the guy, at the end of Godfather 2, the cold-hearted killer and such. And I don't think so. I think if they did that again and they just had him going through the motions of doing that stuff, it wouldn't be worth watching because we just
No.
saw it so brilliantly in the first two movies. There has to be an evolution of the character
Yeah.
from where Michael was at the beginning to where he was at the end, which again goes back to where, Coppola and Puzo wanted to do the death of Michael Corleone. It was about like the last parts of his chapter and the stuff that he has to live with and everything. Like to me, out of all the characters in cinema history, I think Michael Corleone is perhaps the most tragic out of all of them,
Yeah, well, he's not a
considering what he goes through.
sociopath. That's
Yeah.
the thing. Like, it couldn't have been like the third movie like people wanted with it being so violent because he's not a sociopath. He's not a psychopath. That's the thing. He is a good man in the first movie, and he's kind of a victim of circumstance in some ways who makes, some really cold-blooded decisions and pays the price for them, you know, in blood. And I think that everything involving his daughter too, with her being murdered at the end, that whole opera house sequence, I think is really well done too. It's just her acting kind of spoils it, and hearing her say with a Valley Girl accent, "Daddy," like it's just, it's you watch it and you cringe and I feel bad for her too,
Yeah.
because as a guy like him should have known that that just was not working and shouldn't have really, you know, he shouldn't have like that's like kind of throwing her to the wolves, putting her in a movie like that, right? Like he could have given her a smaller role. She could have played the Bridget Fonda role or something like that.
Mm,
It's just he kind of he just did she even have any acting experience when this was made? Like it was just, oh yeah, be in the movie because you're my daughter, and it just what a terrible mistake that was. And I'm shocked that like Pacino and the rest of the cast and nobody spoke up because nobody did her any favors. And I think for her, it was a big cross to bear because that's all she was thought of as for years is the girl who ruined Godfather 3. And then, of course, it turned out that she was a brilliant director. And she really is a terrific director. And she made some great movies. She's still making great movies. I think at this point, she's a better director than he is just because, she's in her prime. Um, but to me, that's the flaw of the movie, though, that it's impossible to get over, and that's what keeps it from being a great film. I think you could even forgive the incest storyline if you had had a better actress in that role. And I hate to come down on her so much because I know it's like the in thing to do is to slam her, and a lot of the critics were very cruel about it when it happened. But you just can't deny the fact that she's terrible in the film. You can't.
The Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you'll love. The process of casting Mary Corleone is fascinating. So in '89, they first went to Madonna to
Mhm.
play the role of, of,
Who would
of
have been
Mary.
wrong too? She wouldn't have been as embarrassing as Sofia Coppola is in the movie, but she wouldn't have been right for the part.
But there would have been a certain sexuality that she brought to the role where you would see, oh, that's why Vincent would have went kind of that
Yeah,
way,
it
right?
would have made more sense. Yes, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
She demanded $1 million and they said no. And
She
then
would have
Julia,
she would have been worth $1 million, but I mean it's strange they didn't want to give her a million. It seems greedy.
it does. Then Julia
Yeah,
Roberts was approached. She said she was willing, but she was just too busy. And of course, Pretty Woman had just come out '89.
yeah,
I imagine Pretty Woman was probably the role she was working on. Which, funny enough, Pacino was attached to that Richard Gere role
yeah,
for such a long time too. It's funny the kind of musical chairs a lot of
yeah.
these actors have. And then Winona Ryder is cast in the role.
But it was supposed to be
So
her.
well, she is on the call sheet. She's supposed to do it. They're actually filming already the film for a couple of months. Because she was working on Mermaids, the film she did with Cher. So she comes to the set, and something's off.
Mhm.
And they had a doctor diagnose her, and she had exhaustion-related illnesses, and she was forced to leave the production. At that point, they're scrambling. So the names that they reconsidered Madonna. They discussed Annabella Sciorra, which I thought would have been fantastic.
He would have been
Laura
great. Yeah,
Laura San Giacomo would have been great.
yeah.
A personal, if I could do backseat casting here, my favorite one, if they could have done it at the time, would have been Marissa Tomei. I think she would have been fantastic in it as well. But
Yeah, she would have been great. Yeah.
But then they went to Sofia Coppola. She said actually, Sophia said that she was when she found out she was cast in the role, she's actually asleep in her room. Her mum rings, the phone rings. Her mum picks it up, and then her mum wakes up Sophia and says, "You've been cast as Mary. Hurry up! You need to be down to the set." That's pretty much how she was cast in the role. And like you said, a lot of like when a film came out, a lot of the press really targeted her performance, um, lack of charisma, the voice, everything else. But you know who was actually a really big supporter of her, which is funny enough, Pauline Kael was
Yeah.
actually a big supporter. She said that what she wrote, it is obvious that this teenage girl is not a trained actress, but she gives the film a breath of life, and I grew to like her. Which I find kind of interesting because of all the kind of like critics of the time, the one with the sharpest kind of knives in the way to kind of word kind of like really precise kind of put downs of actors and directors as Pauline Kael on it, but she really took to Sophia, which is kind of interesting. I think.
She was a contrarian too. I mean, I think that she often would deliberately fly in the face of like, political, like, critical fervor, right? I think that she would be the one that you could rely on to take like a unique take, to have a unique take on movies. I think that's what made her Pauline Kael. But yeah, no, I mean, I feel like you watch that performance now, it is hard to defend.
When it comes to filming, they begin in 13th October 1989. They do go over budget. They do go over the scheduled Thanksgiving 1990
I mean,
release
that's
date.
that's Coppola for you though. That happens when you hire him. I mean, that's gonna inevitable.
See, a lot of people blamed Winona and her departure. Some people even put out in the press that Pacino and Diane Keaton were having some type of fighting on the set because they had this on and off, on again, off again relationship.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it was Coppola. He's like, supposedly, he's like, he doesn't even have an ending. Like 5 months into, like before the film is supposed to get finished, he's still tinkering with ending. Pacino said that the original ending for the film was that he's the one that gets shot on the stairs. And then Kay comes to him and she says, Michael, are you okay? Are you dying? And he says, no, and then he dies, which is like a callback to the first film where she asked him about his business and he says, I'm not anything, and closes the door. And he said one of the reasons why he really wanted to do the film, besides the money, of course, was that ending. And then that ending changed as soon as Sophia came on, and everything just kind of like changed all around with the film. Um, but the film does release Christmas Day in 1990. And it's the final cost of the film is 55 million, but on the first day he makes like $15 million so what's it called opening weekend it makes 15 million dollars. It makes a bucket of money. I mean, it says on it was the best ever Christmas Day opening to date during that time. And he made $20 million in the first 5 days of distribution. And so it was a hit because people were really waiting for this film. I imagine that if you were like a film goer who grew up in the 70s and such, and you watch those Godfather films, and it's like, oh my God, number
Oh, it's an
three,
event. Yeah, of course. It was an
Coppola,
event.
Pacino, all these guys, and then you go to it, and I think like it would have been interesting to see what would have been like in the foyer afterwards. I think for some of the
I
people
mean,
who
my
were filming
parents
this.
were looking forward to it, and I remember my father had told me that that he thought it was good, just not like the other two. Like it was kind of, he never had like any. I think maybe the criticism of Sofia Coppola maybe kind of more happened later than it did when they watched the movie. I think that was kind of something that when people kind of went back and forensically looked at the movie and started to kind of tear it apart and take it down piece by piece, I think that's more when people started to have an issue with her performance outside of the critics. I think the mainstream movie-going public didn't really care at first. But then I think as you study the first two movies and they become such a part of the cultural lexicon with those movies being reissued over and over and over again, it becomes like the redheaded stepchild in some ways, right? But I am, like you said, I still think it's a good movie though. That it's just a very flawed movie, you know?
I think the thing is that when you have those two films in front of you,
Yeah.
I think anything that will be presented, even if we're talking about having Winona Ryder in the roles of
Oh
Sophia and
yeah.
everything else,
Yeah.
it's such a big bar to be set beforehand that it's going to be near impossible. Like, what are the threequels that really match the
I,
original
you know,
film in a
I,
lot of
I I
ways?
honestly can barely even think of one. Like, I mean, a third movie that was, as good as the other two when the first two were masterpieces. I mean, it's pretty much unheard of, right? Even Nolan had a hard time doing it with the Dark Knight Rises. I mean, I think that happens a lot, in movies when you're doing like a franchise. Um, the thing about it too is that Coppola was a different director by this point
Mm.
too. And I think that, for better or worse, one of the things that made the original Godfather was because he didn't have all this freedom to go and, chase his own flights of fancy. He kind of had to do what he was told. And I think that Coppola, honestly, is always at his best when he's got somebody on his shoulder and he's got somebody keeping him in line. He needs a guy like Robert Evans, to be there. And he needs a guy like Charlie Bludorn, or he needs a producer like that, a strong producer that kind of won't let him just go overboard and make crap. I mean, you look at Apocalypse Now, that was the one where he went crazy, right? And that movie barely works. It's a great film, don't get me wrong. It's a great film, but it's a miracle that that film came off the way it did, considering everything that went wrong on that set, to the point that Marlon Brando shows up morbidly
Mm.
obese.
Yeah.
Everything just kind of worked. It was a miracle in some ways. But I think that movie aside, I think that Coppola has shown time and time again he needs a very strong hand in the producer's chair because that's not where he is. That's not where his talents lie. He needs somebody to bring out the best in him. And I think that he had that on the first two Godfather movies, but he did not have it on the third. I think they let him alone. I think they let him do what he wanted.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere. And I think a big example of that, I think like the last act of the movie where it's like 30 minutes set with an opera in the background.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if that, I mean, just looking in the history of it, there's like a lot of talk about like opera and stuff like that in and a lot of the notes from a lot of people, like Francis, people don't want to see like the opera when they go to the movies. They want to watch a movie. And it does, like in the film, it works in a certain way. But I think you can't think of any other director who would do, like, just say if Scorsese directed number three, something like that wouldn't be in it, right? Because
No.
there's certain tastes that Coppola has, and certain things that he kind of gravitates to, that he puts in his movies, that is just, while they are cinematic in the sake of art, they're not necessarily good for movie business necessarily.
Yeah, no.
And I think a lot of time he's kind of like his flights of fancy that you spoke of, because if he's tasting different things, whether they be the opera, Shakespeare, or whatever else it is. Sometimes it's a deconstruction of an idea, like he's done outside of Bram Stoker's Dracula. He did a vampire film. I forgot what it was called. With Val Kilmer, Twixt, I think it was called, and he tried
Yeah.
to do
Well,
like
my
those things
my
just don't work.
my thing about him too is I think he's also not always a very good judge of performance.
Right.
I think that the reason why the Godfather movies, the first two, and the conversation work is that he's working with the best actors of their generation who could not make a false move even if they tried, right? And it's the same thing with Apocalypse Now, to be honest. It's such a well-cast movie that of course, it was going to be at least interesting to see because these people are all delivering amazing performances. But then you look at Godfather 3, and it's got Sofia Coppola. You look at Dracula, Keanu Reeves, as much as I love him, is as bad in Dracula as Sofia Coppola is in Godfather 3. I mean,
Mm.
he's terrible in it. And it's any other director would have seen that right away, would have known that he was miscast. But I don't think he's a very good judge of performances sometimes. Um, it's the same thing if you go to Megalopolis now. You watch that movie and Adam Driver gives a terrible performance in that film. As far as I'm concerned, the only one in that movie who actually gives a good performance is the one that he had the hardest time with, is Shia
Oh,
LaBeouf,
yeah.
because he's the only one who kind of sees that Francis at this point doesn't really know what he's doing, and he had to take kind of control himself. And I think that that's why, if you watch that movie, the only one who doesn't completely embarrass themselves in the movie is Shia LaBeouf. Everybody else is awful, from Adam Driver to Natalie Emmanuel to John Voight. I mean, John
John
Voight
Boyd.
is
Yeah.
embarrassing in that film. But Shia LaBeouf is great. He's the one person in that movie that's terrific.
So we talked about the death of Michael Corleone. This is the 30th anniversary director's cut. There was actually a previous director's cut toward before this.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's always
Godfather,
tinkering with his movies too, though. That's the
he's
thing.
a
That's
tinkerer.
Coppola. I mean, how many
Yeah.
times has he reissued Apocalypse Now? How many cuts are there of that movie?
I know he's like the Ridley Scott kind of like it does that
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well, right? A lot of stuff. So The
Mhm.
Godfather 3, the director's cut, was released on home video. So he said at the time, this is what me and Mario really wanted. It's a new 170 7 minute version. People say that the pacing and actors' performances are more compelling, especially Pacino's. But I'm kind of interested. Is the version we're watching on DVD now, like the ones they have in a box set, or is that the director's cut version, the home video, or the theatrical version? I'm not 100%. I couldn't find any research on that.
I think it's the theatrical cut. I think that's the one that's out. Um, Yeah, let me take a look at that. Actually, it's interesting because I'm pretty sure that the one that is part of like the 4K restoration, I think that that's actually the theatrical version of the movie, and then the director's cut that's out now is like the release of
Coda.
yeah, no. So I'm reading it now. So basically so the final director's cut, the one that you're talking about, that's 170 minutes, that came out on VHS and Laserdisc.
Mm.
And it was also on DVD and on Blu-ray, okay, until 2020. But then the theatrical cut was the one that was reissued in 2022 when they put it out in 4K UHD, right? And the version that I have is the streaming version of the film, and I could look at it right now because I've got the I've got the trilogy on that I on digital. So let's see. So the director's cut is 170 minutes and the theatrical version at 162 minutes. And I think that that's the version of The Godfather 3 that's that's out. Oh no, actually. No, it says let's see.
So the version I got several of the box sets because every time a box set came out, I bought it. I got some really cool ones. I got one with like it's like a gun box, and
No, the
other
one
great
that's
ones too.
street the one that's sorry, the one that's streaming now is the theatrical version, not the director's cut. The director's cut doesn't seem to be available.
So yeah, it's really interesting just how which cuts are out there. But the death of Michael
Mhm.
Corleone, the Coda one, 30th anniversary came out in 2020, which I think would have been COVID time, I think,
Yeah, it
2020.
was COVID time. I remember distinctly that that came out during COVID.
So that's like, I think that's kind of like the one that everyone really liked. And I did like that one too, but the theatrical to me still has something to it. You mentioned before about how Andy Garcia, about an idea of him playing the Don like in a future film. So when the Coda cut came out, he had a interview, I think it was with Business Insider. He
Can
talked
I add
about how,
something? Can I
yeah,
add
go ahead.
something? Sorry. So I have the one that I bought is the one that was the death of Michael Corleone, and that
Right.
one comes with both the theatrical version and the director's
And
cut.
director's
So there's
cut.
three. So there's three versions there. So they're all available. All of them are available in 4K.
Three cracks at Godfather Part 3 works.
But the one that's
Um,
streaming on like most of the streaming services is the theatrical version, not the director's cut. But they're all available if you buy it.
so when it comes to this sequel, Garcia was saying that he had an idea that he presented
Yeah.
to DiCaprio because he and DiCaprio have the same agent. And so
Mhm.
the idea that he had was that DiCaprio is plays Vito back in the no, no, sorry. DiCaprio plays Sonny back in the
Yeah.
30s. De Niro could play Vito because he'll be older by then. And then on the other side of the story, it would be Vincent Mancini. And he also said an hour returning as Michael. So I imagine it will be set between, before, Michael Corleone dies in his rocking chair at
Yeah,
death.
because there's a whole chunk of time that happens after Godfather 3 and before he dies. And in fact, in the director's cut, in the Death of Michael Corleone, he lives. That's the whole
Yeah.
point of the movie. It's actually suggested at the end of the movie that he might be immortal, right? It's a
Right.
weird thing that he does where he goes like the curse is long life. You're cursed with long life, basically, that you can't die. And that's at the end of the movie. He's this really doddering, feeble old man, but he's not dead. And that's like supposed to be his curse, like his punishment for his sins. And if you look at it as a religious allegory, then maybe he's never going to die. You know?
There's certain sequels that have been made lately. whether it be Top Gun Maverick or the latest Indiana Jones, Blade Runner, the second one, where they bring in a different director, a younger director, more modern filmmaking sensibilities. If they were to do another Godfather chapter, like a number four, um, you wouldn't bring Coppola back, right? Maybe as a producer, maybe as a story credit or exec producer or something,
I
but you
would
have
know.
someone that's directed, yeah?
I wouldn't do this movie without Coppola. No, I don't want. I think it would be as much as Megalopolis was a terrible film. I don't think there's any way to do these movies without Francis Ford Coppola, and I don't think that you'd get Garcia or Pacino on board either. To me, there's no director that can do that. You just need to leave the series alone. I'm
Mm.
sure Paramount is interested in making a legacy sequel because Pacino's still alive. So is De Niro. Garcia
Garcia.
is a relatively young man. You could do it. And I'm sure. Look, I think that if Coppola was to get his shit together and decide that he wants to do a fourth movie, where the studio can have some say, and you give him a really strong producer like a David Heyman or something like that, like an artistic producer, somebody that knows how to make a good movie, that won't let him go completely off the rails, but also won't overly commercialize it either. I think there's a great movie that could be made, but he needs a very strong producer and a very strong script. And I don't think he's going to do it at this point. I think he's kind of over it, but I could see it happening. I mean, he's not, he's still around. He's still making movies, so who knows? Maybe he'll take one last kick at the can. I think it's unnecessary though.
Well, considering he made number three because he was in financial distress, and Megalopolis was such a bomb, and he invested $100 million of his own money in it, even though he's incredibly successful with his wine business and such. If he finds himself in the financial distress as well, there is an out, right?
Oh, of course, he could make one. He could get this movie made tomorrow if he wanted to. You know it. He can go to Paramount. If you were to get Pacino, you were to get that cast together, everybody would want to work with him. He would be able to get it made, no problem.
Yes. Do you think a TV series would be something that's feasible as well, or is Godfather a purely cinematic product?
I mean, to me, it's purely cinematic. I don't think you would ever get Coppola doing a TV series. I think he's a purist. I don't see him ever agreeing to something like that. Um, Again, if they were to do like I feel like they've pitched this that they want to do like a Godfather series set in between the movies or something like that with somebody else, but who needs it? Like it's just
Mm.
it's not necessary. Leave these movies alone. Let them be what they are, an imperfect trilogy. It is what it is. Let's not do revisionist filmmaking here. If Coppola wants to come and have one last kick if they can, let him. But otherwise, just leave it alone. But they won't. I mean, Hollywood isn't like that. Inevitably, they'll convince Coppola to sell off the rights or something like that, and for an obscene amount of money, and they'll I'm sure at some point we'll get some kind of Godfather content.
And imagine as well with Puzo not being around anymore, his writing partner, that he will be like, without Mario around, I can't do any. He wouldn't do anything. Even though there have been books made where, like, I'd supposedly like the Puzo family trust or whatever, like allowed other writers take ideas that Mario had, and like there's like I think like four or five novels now, different kind of Godfather stories of Vincent and Michael and such.
Yeah,
And
and it
yeah.
and it's interesting because Puzo isn't that good of a writer. I mean,
Mm.
if you read The Godfather, the novel is trash. It's
Yeah.
a really trashy book, that's meant for like an airport read, and it's not this great piece of literature. The movie really improved on the book. It's one of the few times that a classic movie suddenly made the reputation of the book soar. It's the same thing with Jaws. Peter Benchley's book is not a good book, but they made a great movie out of it. And I think that that's always the key. I think a not great book can become a great movie, but I don't think a great book can become a great movie a lot of the time.
Well, it's such a fascinating movie, The Godfather Part 3. There are a legion of us around that love the film, even though we acknowledge the flaws. There's so
Oh
few
yeah, of
quality
course.
casting, the lack of Robert Duvall, who wanted as much money, but Pacino didn't get it. So what can you do? But at the end of the day, I think Pacino's performance, I love Andy Garcia in the film. I think the scenes we talked about, the helicopter hit, the confession. With one thing we didn't really get into was once I'm out, they pull me back in, which is like, I think The
Oh, yeah,
Sopranos
great
has a
line.
lot. I think
Yeah.
The Sopranos has a lot to do with kind of like keeping the Godfather 3 spirit alive as well, because in the film in the series that's when they quote Godfather, that's the number one thing they always quote all the
Yeah.
time. So yeah.
That line, yeah.
So
I mean, it is an iconic line, and it is an iconic movie in its own right. I mean, I am glad it exists as well. It's imperfect, but if I ever watch, I mean, the thing about the Godfather movies, I can never just watch one of them, right? Like
mm,
inevitably, I watch the first one, and I'm like, well, I better watch number two, and then as soon as I'm done number two, it's well, I'm going to watch number three now, of course, or
yeah.
whatever version I want to watch that night, and so I rewatch it a whole bunch, I can't help myself, and I'm always entertained by it.
Considering the three cuts, if someone was going to do a Godfather marathon, and which number three would you say to them to watch in succession after one and
I
two?
mean, I think for an audience that hasn't seen it, I think probably this new cut is the best cut because it kind of minimizes a lot of things that are not great about the first movie, and it's a faster paced film. Um, I think it's less punishing for the audience, and I think that they will enjoy the movie more. That said, he did do the whole re-edit of the series too, where it's all chronological. Although I've never been a fan
Oh
of that.
yeah, right.
I've never been a
Was it a
fan of that.
HBO one? Was it HBO
Yeah, he's done
edition?
it a bunch of times. But it's never been something that I've liked because I always thought that the best way to do those movies is just to watch them as the films that they were made in. No, I would recommend The Death of Michael Corleone as the definitive cut. I think Coppola is a good editor, and I think he's making excellent cuts of his movies. Like he's recut a lot of his movies. Even One from the Heart is better now than it was when it came out.
Mm.
His recut of The Outsiders is significantly better than the original one that came out. It's like a half hour longer. He jettisoned the score that his father did, Carmine Coppola, which was not a very good score, and he just scored it with music from the era. And it's so much better than the original version of that movie. Um, so he is like that's the thing. He's still talented. He's not an untalented person. I think he just went completely kind of cuckoo bananas with Megalopolis. And I think maybe once he finally lets that go, who knows? Maybe he can deliver one last great movie. I also don't think he was trying to make a Godfather with Megalopolis. I think he was trying to do what he always does and what he did with Zoetrope. He tried to make this thing that was going to change the industry and he failed. But there's something kind of beautiful about his failure. And there's a great, great book about him too that I wanted to mention about that whole period. That was by oh yeah, it's called The Path to Paradise, a Francis Ford Coppola story. It's by Sam Wasson. It is an amazing book. It's all about basically him after he did Godfather 2 all the way up to Godfather 3, like that whole
Mm.
period, and it's great. And Coppola completely participated in, and it's basically just how he kind of went totally bankrupt and lost his way. And it's fascinating to read because you get kind of exactly what his intentions were, and you see why he was just not a guy to run a company at all. He had no head for business in this case. Definitely a great head for business and wine, but in filmmaking, his artistic ambitions always got in the way of his business sense. And unfortunately, his artistic ambitions didn't pay off most of the time.
Well, Godfather 3, a film that I love. Chris, you love it too. For everyone out there listening, I'm going to have links in the show notes to both the all the director's cuts that you can watch online. Um, Path to Paradise as well. I'm going to put a link to that as well because that sounds like a
Yeah,
fascinating book.
it's a great book.
And Chris Bumbray, I thank you so very much for your time today. I know you're a very,
Yeah, my
very busy
pleasure.
man. And Merry Christmas to you and everyone over at JoBlo and a Happy New
You
Year as
too.
well. And hopefully 2026 pans out better than 2025 because
I
2025
hope
has been a
so.
bit of a shitty year.
A little more harmony, peace and harmony in the world would be a good thing.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.